school year started around here last week. Actually, it was week before last because the first day of school was on a Wednesday, which I guess if I were one of the people that made the school calendar, that would make sense to me. I am just old enough to remember when school actually started in September. I still remember how cheated I felt the first year that school went back in August, because it must have been when I was in second or third grade, maybe fourth grade, because it had been September long enough for me to have gotten used to it and to have come to expect school coming back in the first week of September. And then all of a sudden, let's just say it was fourth grade. Fourth grade starts up the last week of August, and it just felt so wrong to me. I've been going to school for 4 years at that point. I'm starting fourth grade, and it's the first time that school has ever come back in August instead of September. Well, that's half my life at that point. That I've been going back to school in September. I've been spending half my 9-year-old life going back to school in September. Now all of a sudden they're pulling this August shit on me? It felt really wrong to me. Now I guess kids are just used to it, but I was part of that transitional generation, at least in this school district, that I remember going back in September and then having to go back in August and feeling like I was being fucked. I didn't think of it in those terms because, again, I was like 9. My life wasn't that much of a mess that at 9 years old I was reacting to things not going my way by thinking to myself, oh, I feel like I'm being fucked. Although, I don't know, my life would have been a lot more horrific, but also a lot more interesting if I were thinking about things in those terms at age 9. When you're using that sort of vocabulary, when you're in the single digits, something has gone horribly wrong with your life. But at the same time, your life will probably someday serve as the basis for at least a so-so movie, wouldn't you think? You would hope.
There used to be this commercial that ran, I think back when I was in high school, for Staples. It was a back-to-school commercial where the parents were shopping for back-to-school supplies at Staples with their kids, and the song playing was the Christmas Carol, It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year. And the parents were all dancing down the aisles and like throwing papers and pencils into the shopping cart while the kids were just sort of glumly following along behind, because back-to-school time for parents is like fucking Christmas. The kids are gonna be gone for 6 or 7 hours of the day, and for the kids it's like we have to go back to school. It really is that sharp of a contrast. I remember when I was a student in school, and it was the worst, because summertime, when you're a kid, when you're a student in school, summertime is the best. Summertime is the time when your time is your own. You don't have to get up and go to school. You can do whatever you want. And even when you get a little bit older, you get into your adolescence and maybe you work a part-time summer job, you're still working at a job that is probably the job you chose to work for. Like, you went out and you interviewed for it and you got the gig and you work a couple hours a day and you get paid, and then you have your own money that you can use however you want on your own time. It's still your time, even when you're working like a summer job. It's still your time. And then summer's over, and you go back to school, and it's not your time anymore. You're at school 6 or 7 hours a day. And then even when you go home, you have homework. You have to do homework. That always seems so wrong to me. And even to this day, even though I'm an adult and I'm way past the high school years and even the college years now, and I still have this instinctive emotional reaction to homework where I'm like, oh, that's just wrong. To make a kid do schoolwork outside of school? That's fucked up. Because I remember how I felt when I was a student, and that's how I felt about it. I was like, this is just so wrong. They're trying to control us after we're out of the school building. We're not at school anymore, but we still have to do work for school. It's not fair. I still have a little bit of that in me. Looking back on my school career, from elementary to middle to high school, I was about as fortunate as you could be, at least in terms of the social scene. I mean, I was never like a hugely popular kid, but my school career was very even and very stable. I never had to make the adjustment of moving to another school district and starting a new school with a whole new peer group. I never had to do that. And we would occasionally have kids who would start with us who had moved from elsewhere in the state, or in a few cases elsewhere in the country. We had people who moved, from the Pacific Northwest to Maryland, or from Idaho to Maryland. And that would always kind of make me think like, wow, that's an adjustment. You not only move from a different part of the country to this part of the country, but now you're a kid, you're in elementary or middle or high school, and you have to adjust not only to a completely new setting, a new house, perhaps new weather you're not used to, but you don't know anybody. You're a kid or you're a teenager when your friends and your social circle is as important to you as it will probably ever be in your life. And you don't know anybody. You have to make new friends in a really forced, contrived way. Like, they just sit you next to motherfuckers, and you have to be like, oh, hi, I'm from California, and now I'm in Maryland. Nice to meet you. I hope I turn out to be one of the popular ones. It's a really, really jarring, stressful situation that I never had to be in. And I'm very grateful for that. I lived in the same town, in the same house for my entire public school career. My elementary school was right across the street from my middle school, which was actually on the same campus as my high school. The middle school and the high school in Clear Spring are right next to each other. The buildings are separate, but they're separated at one point. At their closest point, they're separated by maybe 10 feet. I mean, they're right next to each other, and they even look the same. So there was very little adjustment that I had to make in terms of going from one school to the next. It was stressful going from elementary to middle school, and it was stressful going from middle to high school, but when I think about it, not nearly as bad as it would have been if I had had to go from a different school district to a new school district. I used to have anxiety dreams about school. I still, to this day, occasionally will have anxiety dreams where I am back in school, usually back in high school. Not very often about elementary or middle school anymore, but usually back in high school. And it's strange because school wasn't that nerve-wracking of an experience for me. I always got decent grades. I never really was in danger of failing. I never felt like my future was in jeopardy. I never had any really traumatic experiences socially. I mean, I never got in fights. I never had like a super embarrassing moment where I was humiliated in front of the whole class. Like, none of that really ever happened for me. But I would still have anxiety dreams where I, show up to school without shoes on. That was a big thing for me. I never had the naked dream. I never had a dream where I showed up someplace and I was naked or even in my underwear. But I would have dreams where I would be at school and I wouldn't have my shoes. Or I would have dreams where I would forget my locker combination. Or I would forget which locker was mine. And those are the ones that I tend to still have today. The shoes dream, not so much, but it seems like once or twice a year I'll have a dream where I'm back in high school and I have forgotten my locker combination. But looking back, it must not have been all that bad if all of my school nightmares were and still occasionally are about like forgetting my shoes or locking myself out of my locker. It must not have been that bad.
The kid calendar kind of revolves around summer, so of course the first day of school was always dreaded. But if you ask me now, since I've had a few years, more than a few years, to think about it, the first day of school is actually not the worst day of school. In fact, I would say that the first day of school is one of the two best days of school. The two best days of school, as I reckon it now, are the first day of school and the last day of school. And the reason why they are the best days of school is because, generally speaking, they are the days when you have the least to do. The first day of school, you're getting to know your teachers, they're putting you in your seat assignments, you're getting to know your friends, you're figuring out where you're going to sit at lunch. A lot of times, a lot of classes, when I was in school, you didn't even have homework the first day. It was so easy. It was like orientation. And the last day of school was pretty much the same thing. The last day of school, you're not coming in the next day. You're done. The worst day is the second day of school. Because the second day of school is the first real day of school. The second day of school is when you start to work, and when the bloom starts to wilt, when you settle in and you realize, oh shit, this is what it's gonna be like. Summer really is over. And if the first day of school were a person, I would want to say to the first day of school, I'm sorry. Because I really had you pegged wrong all those years. When I was actually in school, when we knew each other, first day of school, I had you wrong. I didn't appreciate you like I should have. I gave you so much shit. I lived in fear of you. I demonized you. I talked mad shit about you all day long. You should have heard the shit that I said about you first day of school, and I was wrong. Second day of school, that's who I should have been fucking talking shit about. Second day of school, that's the one that deserves the anger and the animus and the bitterness and the resentment. It's the second day. And you know what? That fucking second day of school has been coasting, has been hiding in your shadow, because the second day of school knows that all the kids fucking hate the first day of school. The first day of school is like Boo Radley, the one that all the kids in the neighborhood are always talking about and are always acting like they're afraid of. But when you get to know the first day of school, you realize that it's really not that bad. That actually the first day of school is your friend. It's the second day of school that you really have to look out for. So if I wanted to continue with this To Kill a Mockingbird metaphor, which I literally just thought up, so bear with me, and apologies in advance if it turns out to not make any sense at all. But if I wanted to continue with this To Kill a Mockingbird metaphor, if the first day of school is like Boo Radley, then the second day of school, the real enemy, would be like racism. Or maybe like Mr. Yule. What do you think? Like, is that anything?